Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, July 29th, 2025, getting to the end of July. Just a few days left to get in on the action. I don't know. Oh, yeah, we have some action to get into here. As a matter of fact, since I've been talking so much more about people coming by or coming out of the woodwork to support the show, coming, back into the woodwork to support the show. I don't really know exactly how to express it, but we've definitely run into a couple of people who have made their way back after some absence, in some cases an extended absence, as supporters of the show. And we also have uncovered a new and interesting problem. Actually, I've seen it before, but I didn't really know what to do about it and didn't know whether anything ought to be done about it. But our latest to join the parade is the Patreon supporter known as Shambhala Jones, who has been a supporter for some time and has increased his contribution, but sent along a note. I went to go and increase my contribution after hearing you, whine and complain about it, or hearing you convince me of the enduring value of the show, which is, what I hope was happening. I went to increase my contribution, and to my shock and dismay, do I have shock and dismay? I certainly have shock and dismay. Music. To my shock and dismay, I found that, in fact, I guess his credit card had expired. And, sometimes that doesn't cause a problem. They very often will reissue you a new card with the same number and a different expiration date. And they just let continuing subscriptions go, which they probably shouldn't do, but sometimes they do. And sometimes they just don't. And then they don't bother going around telling you, hey, this or that subscription is lapsing. So while he was here, he found out, oh yeah, hey, my subscription had lapsed at some point. I'm sorry about that. And, it's not a problem. We forgive you. It happens to everybody. In fact, it does happen from time to time. I have seen it happen. And it occurs to me that it may be happening more frequently than I thought. And because I try not to get in anybody's business if they stop supporting the show. I mean, you shouldn't. Don't. But, it could be any number of reasons. And, me, my first assumption is, well, I've done something wrong here. I've said something. They're angry at me, or I don't know. Occasionally, it's hard to get mad at Greg, but people do it from time to time. Believe me, I've gotten the weirdest comments along the way in the various fora in which comments can be left for us. And I joke with them all the time about it. Is that I get comments that like, we have to stop David from interrupting Greg. Like, okay. And then comes, of course, alongside comments like, please, Greg, stop interrupting David. And I can't take it anymore because they interrupt one another. Whatever. I get those frequently, too. I know. Some people find it very annoying. We find it to be a funny part of the show. We'll still try to bring you the information you need. Mostly, we mostly get out of one another's way. Anyway, I also have comments like, I don't know what's going on. The first hour of the show is great when Greg Dworkin reads the news, and then this boring guy goes on for another hour. You should just listen to the first hour, but only 3 days a week. And I get the opposite, of course. Can't wait for the news on Greg's days to be over so I can hear. Well, I don't know what they think they're going to hear, but anyway, like any product review, this is the worst product ever. This is the best product ever. 1 star, 5 stars. It happens. Anyway, we welcome the Patreon supporter known as Shambhala Jones back. And it occurs to me that because I don't want to get in anybody's, business about when they leave as a supporter of the show, instead of assuming that they're leaving because I've done something terribly wrong, I probably should just have a check-in of some kind through the messaging system. First of all, I should monitor this stuff more closely when people leave and make a point of just saying, well, sorry to see you go. Hope we can get you back someday, because some people are going to say, well, I didn't mean to go. My credit card expired and I want to go back. And why would we want to miss out on that? Others, of course, look, circumstances change, or I like the show, I just like 10 other shows, and I want to support one of them, or I can't fit it all in, or I don't know, I'm listening less often, or I lost my job, or I didn't lose my job, but I want to have a lot more money in my pocket. Any number of things could make people do it. But for the people who just say, I didn't mean to leave, well, let's help those people out. Okay, well, that's supporter news for the day, and we're, like I said, time marches onward. We've had such a great streak in July. I say anybody who wants to get in on it and maybe want to help shatter the monthly record, we've got a couple of days left. That's where we were. Right, end of July is coming up. Let's have everybody jump on the bandwagon, and of course we could do it again in August because we're going to be broadcasting in August, and it's important for yous to support us on a monthly basis. So it's not just July, of course, but on the other hand, I forget exactly how Patreon does their billing now, but this is a good chance to jump in and be a part of the now, I guess, new and larger number making its way to us in terms of monthly support. Like, we have boosted that number. It would be very nice to continue to boost it and make a big statement by the beginning of August, and then make a bigger statement at the end of August as well. So, all right, end of the month. That's as good a time as any to start drumming up business and drumming up extra support. You will also notice, here's something, we're going mainstream. I have been offered the opportunity, along with every single customer of Libsyn. It's not an exclusive opportunity, to add ads to the show. So if you are a Libsyn downloader, listener kind of person, I don't know why downloader twice, but if you download every show twice, fantastic, because I guess it helps generate revenue now. There'll be a small stream of revenue coming in from this. And, there's some ability to tweak what kinds of ads are allowed, but I wanted to be the least restrictive about them. I figure you guys are all grown-up people, and you can handle hearing, I don't know, an ad from Lockheed Martin saying that they make the best death machines or something like that, and whatever. So you can add pre-show and post-show ads, and you can add ads in the middle. Now, we have breaks in the show, so it makes some sense to add a couple of ads. And it's a bit of an annoyance. It's a bit of an interruption. I don't think any of the ads are longer than a minute long. Most of them seem to be 30-second ads. So we added a couple during the breaks. It'll add a little bit to those of you who are listening podcast-wise rather than the live show. So there's a couple ways to avoid the commercial breaks that have actual commercials in them. One would be to listen to the live show. And two, if you just can't stand it, listening to the show with ads in it, there are such people, bothers me too, at Libsyn, just like everybody else. The answer is you can, of course, sign up for the show at Patreon and support us directly. I think the way this works is that it's the Libsyn server, when it's serving you the show, that inserts the ads. So while I guess we hope for the most traffic possible at those places so that other people can be sending us their money, you can, of course, opt to send some on your own and listen to it commercial-free over at Patreon. So that's like super professional and stuff like that. Another tier. The free tier comes with ads. Or if you are Amazon Prime Video or Netflix or whatever, I'll charge you and give you ads. You can also do that, right? You can be a monthly Patreon supporter, but download the show from Libsyn and I guess boost our numbers such that they pay us more for the ads. I don't know. So I appreciate it and letting you know that that's the case. And you can really stuff this stuff full of ads and really make it a nuisance. And we try to, we limit it to the breaks and we try to limit the number of ads that are in there. But I guess I should try it out with some, just the old episodes. You can do this retroactively. So we're going to be filling in those ads in the mid-roll thing. We can experiment with one and say, I don't know, the July 4th show is going to have 1,500 ads in it. See how that goes. All right. Well, like I said, you want to keep the ads to a minimum. You know how it's done. Just as it's done ineffectively in the streaming video world where they end up just screwing you both ways in the end. Let's go for that. Okay. So as I said, let's move forward here. July 29th, Tuesday, gives us a good opportunity to get some of the older stories out of the Instapaper queue. But because it's America, we have to acknowledge we are, once again, broadcasting under the shadow of a mass shooting. And this time, although there's a mass shooting just about every day, and in fact several, this one happened in a major media market. So there you go. In New York, 5 people, including the gunman, apparently now dead in a shooting in a New York City high-rise, Park Avenue area, I believe. And Republicans, of course, taking advantage of the opportunity to say, see, it's not the problem isn't guns, it's New York City. New York City, yeah, they believe New York City is outrageously violent, and no wonder they would have such gun violence, except that almost all of the places where these politicians, Republican politicians, come from have higher gun violence and gun death rates than New York City by far, but they can point to the big city and say that's what's at fault. And it's hard to, deflect the blame, or at least the weirdness, as photos are emerging in this story of the gunman just walking on the streets of New York City with an AR-15 type long assault rifle. And that's an unusual sight normally in New York City, although we've also experienced mass shootings in Colorado where the same thing happened and people called the police. Only there the police said, you can open carry an AR-15 in Colorado if you want to. Call us when you start shooting people. Well, on the other hand, that just seems to be the police response everywhere now. And also up to and including, if you do call us when they start shooting people, call us when they stop shooting people so that we know when we can go in and do something about the shooter, because we're not going in there if that guy's shooting. Uvalde, et cetera, et cetera. And more recently, and this too is somewhere in Instapaper waiting to come out, news emerged, I think really for me, over the weekend of the police response to the shootings of the state legislators in Minnesota, the murders in Minnesota that happened in the middle of last month, June. And I guess only now examining police responses. And you may recall that in that case, the gunman was dressed ostensibly like a policeman, although now everybody says they're dressed like a policeman and wearing masks, etc. But if you're in jeans and a hat, but you have a tactical vest of some kind with some alphabet soup letters on the front and back, you can say you're a policeman. Anyway, apparently here too, the police response far less than optimal, up to and including apparently being on the scene at one of the homes where the people were being shot and witnessing the shooting in the doorway of one of the victims, and then yet apparently refusing to do anything or go in and help for an hour. Is that what I read? I have to see if I can find this thing in Instapaper. I'm sure I'm not positive I put this aside. And sometimes things don't somehow, click all the way through, but it's been rather amazing, let's say. Was it perhaps not an article, but a Blue Sky post possibly? I'll see if we can't find it, although now I feel like I'm past it chronologically, but I'm sure I can look it up. In the meantime, I can give you the basics of what happened in New York City just so that it's on the record and we can watch it happening. I have an NBC News page open here with, I guess, I don't know, the latest, what we know about the New York City office tower shooting, victims and suspect, and I don't know if we want to be the first radio program to be calling out the shooter's name, but they have it, and of course that will maybe provide some important context, though. 5 people, including a New York City police officer, died in a shooting in Manhattan. Suspected gunman died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, as these things often end this way. Let's see. Inside a high-rise corporate building in the heart of Manhattan on Monday evening. And let's see, killing a police officer, a Blackstone executive, and 2 other people, officials said. I don't know whether they think it's targeted or not. Suspected shooter acted alone, allegedly, minus the manufacture of the AR-15, of course, and the free distribution of the AR-15, and the lack of response to a person on the street with an AR-15, and also died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Law enforcement officials told NBC. The deadly gunfire, first reported about 6:30 p.m., was treated as an active shooting, which it was, prompting warnings and office evacuations, with lines of people seen leaving the building with their hands above their heads. Because, of course, if you are being shot at by a mass shooter, the first thing police want you to do is pretend you're under arrest for some strange reason. I know, the gunman could be sneaking out. They're always very cautious. The gunman's motive has not been disclosed. We may never know it anyway. Officials familiar with the investigation told NBC News. However, the suspect left a note that mentions a possible cause of his mental illness. Investigators are looking into whether that is a reason why he targeted the Park Avenue building, which houses the NFL's headquarters. I don't know. We'll see. The victims included a 36-year-old police officer. It's Didarul Islam, by the way, an immigrant to the United States from Bangladesh. Oh, look at that. All of a sudden, the Republicans will find a way to have a moment's hero worship for an immigrant. But, of course, then they'll be happy because they don't have to deport him. So all the work's been done. These are not honorable people we're talking about, of course, the Republicans. Anyway, he was, it says, doing what he does best, and all members of the police department carry out, says, of course, Mayor Adams, saving lives, protecting New Yorkers. Now, he was assigned to the 47th precinct in the Bronx. I'm not sure what he was doing in Manhattan, but hopefully helping. And, then he would in fact leave behind a legacy of helpfulness, if not heroism necessarily. But I don't know. I don't know what he did, so can't say just yet, but hope so. Islam, the father of 2 young boys, expecting a 3rd child with his wife, according to the police commissioner, Jessica Tisch. And it does say he put himself in harm's way. He made the ultimate sacrifice, shot in cold blood, wearing a uniform that stood for the promise that he made to the city. Sorting rhetoric, but, died in uniform. That's got to be mentioned here. 3 civilians also died, including Blackstone executive Wesley Lepatner, according to the investment firm. He was the global head of Core Plus Real Estate. I have no idea what that means. And CEO of one of the largest funds owned by Blackstone, the Blackstone Real Estate Income Trust, or BREIT, BREIT, I guess. I don't know how they pronounce it. And I said he, didn't I? Wesley Lepatner, but Wesley Lepatner is she. She joined the firm in 2014 after spending more than a decade working at Goldman Sachs, where she began her career. I don't believe I've run into a woman Wesley before, but no reason that couldn't be the case. But pardon the mistake. I didn't mean to add insult to injury here, but all right, let's see. Others, I don't want to linger on it too much, but there's a statement, of course, from the NFL, which has its headquarters in the office tower. It's interesting to know. One of our employees was seriously injured in this attack. He's currently in the hospital in stable condition. That sounds good, like they may pull through. NFL staff are at the hospital. We are supporting his family. No name associated with that one, and that is just fine. What can I tell you? Then they go into describing the gunman. I'll just give you the fact that he was 27 years old, just to give you perhaps some mental picture of what's going on here. Then the photo of an unidentified man, interestingly enough, at an active shooting event at 345 Park Avenue in New York City Monday. This is meant to imply, of course, that this is the shooter, which I guess it is. So if he is identified and you think this is him, well, I don't know what to tell you. In a photo 3 law enforcement officials shared with NBC News, the gunman is seen walking into the Midtown Manhattan building wearing dark clothes and sunglasses and carrying what appears to be a large firearm. Okay, well, that'll do it. what can I tell you? There's more to the story, of course, but I just, wanted to acknowledge that it had happened and put it on the record. And then that did lead me to wonder about, though, the Minnesota shootings and see if I can find a decent story about that, because I thought, put it aside. Oh, let's see. Yeah, no, some of these stories that came up are ones that were from closer to the time of the shooting. But here's the Star Tribune with the new details just 3 days ago about the police response. And, new details about police activity after lawmaker shootings raise questions about response. And I think that they probably do. Now, here, after begging everybody to support the show, I run into a paywall on this article, which is too bad, and everybody should, I guess, support the Minnesota Star Tribune as well. But I'm going around their paywall, which I shouldn't be doing. However, I guess I could say if we had everybody who is listening to the show and downloading the show regularly supporting the show, then there would be plenty of money for a lot more subscriptions, and we could pass that money around and support some good journalism jobs, like Jeff Day's. Jeff Day works at the Star Tribune and wrote this piece, I believe. I mean, according to the Instapaper version of here, the story here. New details about police activity after lawmaker shootings raise questions about response. Here's what I'm talking about. At least 100 law enforcement officers, including local police, sheriffs, and the FBI, stage in this photo here, less than a mile from the home of Minnesota DFL State Representative Melissa Hortman in Brooklyn Park on June 14th. And, of course, Melissa was murdered in this shooting spree. And from the first 911 call moments after Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman said, and his wife Yvette, were shot at their home in the early morning of June 14th. Police knew a masked gunman was impersonating an officer, had targeted a politician, and was on the move. Yet it would take 10 hours for law enforcement to systematically alert lawmakers to the exact nature of the danger they faced. That seems like they could do that more quickly, don't you think? Communication across a patchwork of agencies was also spotty, leaving some officials unaware of the threat for hours, and raising questions about whether the suspect, Vance Bolter, could have been caught earlier. In at least one instance, police didn't follow their own procedures. Why not? When they responded to attacks on the homes of lawmakers. The shootings killed Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark and wounded the Hoffmans. A Minnesota Star Tribune investigation has found new details about the law enforcement response to the shootings, including then a bunch of bullet points. First, the initial 911 call made at 2:05 a.m. by the Hoffman's daughter, Hope, included the fact that the suspect was disguised as a police officer and wearing a mask, which is never a good idea, but we do it all the time now. Second bullet point, in a deviation from department policy, Brooklyn Park Police waited more than an hour to enter the home of Melissa Hortman after watching Mark Hortman get shot in the doorway. And I am emphasizing that for two reasons, not the least of which is that this is bolded and in color and indicates that there is a link to a story about that fact. And that's true. And that was published sometime earlier. But of course, the pop-ups, I can't even read the date on this piece. But the fact of its existence is all you need to know. And then, of course, emphasizing it because what the effing F? What? They were called to the home and they watched somebody get shot in the doorway and then said, let's wait an hour? I mean, this is like shades of Uvalde here. What is going on? Next bullet point says, New Hope Police didn't immediately communicate an officer's interaction with Bolter, an interaction which occurred after the Hoffmans were shot, but before the Hortmans were killed. Like, you actually found him on his way to another murder, and the interaction apparently didn't include arresting him. I mean, I guess they just couldn't figure out that it was him, or maybe at that point the communication was so poor they didn't know they were looking for somebody who was disguised as a cop. I don't know. And then last bullet point here, some police officers and legislators weren't made fully aware of the threat for several hours. Well, there's a quote here. There wasn't a playbook for this, and I think that was clear, said DFL Senator Erin May Quaid. Bolter, the gunman, is now facing state and federal murder charges, state attempted murder charges, and federal charges of stalking and use of a firearm. State Public Safety Commissioner Bob Jacobson said that, quote, law enforcement did an admirable job of trying to respond and make sure that they were doing their very best in this case. Still, Jacobson and public safety leaders ordered a review of their conduct that morning, and Minnesota's Office of the Legislative Auditor said it would consider launching its own investigation into how communication was shared. We've received several responses to an inquiry or a review related to the communication around the rapid response, Legislative Auditor Judy Randall said Thursday. The first interaction between law enforcement and Bolter, this is one of the interesting parts here, took place near the home of Senator Ann Rest. This has got to scare the crap out of her. At 2:36 a.m., when a New Hope police officer, quote, self-dispatched. Not sure exactly what that's supposed to mean, but he did so to perform a spot check on Rest's home. Not a rest home, but you get the idea. The officer, a 12-year veteran, encountered Bolter sitting in his makeshift police vehicle. You never really want to be in a makeshift anything, but okay. And I guess I don't know whether he had the information he was looking for, a fake police officer or not. It never reached him, I guess. The officer, because this officer believed Bolter was a police officer who was checking on Rest, and he asked Bolter to roll down his window, right? You know, routine things. He was a bald white male staring straight ahead, according to the court records. Bolter didn't respond to the New Hope officer, who left to check on Rest. That's an interesting one, right? Roll down your window and just no action, huh? Try getting away with that yourself, by the way. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Internet News Radio. Did I say that correctly? Yeah, I hope so. Anyway, it kind of came out a little wacky, but hey, ignore that and pay attention to this. We left off in the middle of this Minneapolis Star-Tribune story about new facts emerging a couple of days ago. It's not new. If you're in Minnesota, you probably already heard it. But the rest of us, I'm still catching up. What happened with the police response to the shootings of the Minnesota the Democratic state legislators in Minnesota, and the weird, in some cases, almost Uvalde-like response to the shootings and the information they were handed. So here is a first encounter at 2:36 a.m. outside of the home of another state legislator who was not, thank God, attacked in this by this guy. Another officer encounters this guy impersonating an officer, and he knocks on his window and says, "Hey, roll down your window." And the guy just doesn't. He just stares straight ahead. Now, at this point, this other officer then says, well, I'm going to go check on Senator Rest, which is not a bad idea overall, although I do wonder whether, you knock on a window and say, hey, roll down your window, and the guy doesn't. Like, if a civilian does that, by the way, then these days, now they smash the window and throw you into an immigrant detention center, and, you're disappeared into a concentration camp and deported to, Somalia. But, a fellow officer, well, there's a certain amount of courtesy you have to offer them by not smashing in their window and saying, hey, didn't you hear me? I said, roll down your window. And up to and including, though, the courtesy of just allowing other officers to ignore them. He didn't find that to be strange enough to stay there for another second and say, hey, roll down your window. I'm going in to check on the senator. Did you already go? Who are you? Where are you from? No response. Like, at some point, do you say, Now, I guess the information, I assume, had the information reached him earlier, we were looking for somebody who's impersonating a police officer, then you would say, this might be the guy. You don't have that. You're clearly, all right, well, I thought he was an officer, although I'm curious about how makeshift this makeshift car is. Okay, so he buys into the idea that he's an officer, but still, why aren't you rolling down your window? Something is weird here. Maybe I ought not yet go to check. On the other hand, if the senator's been attacked and is in there needing assistance, you want to get in there as soon as possible. And though I'm confused by this scene outside, I do want to know whether the senator is okay, and that's my top priority. It's a little weird, to say the least. Now, when the officer went and checked on, I guess, or attempted to check on the senator and then returned, Bolter was gone. Several sources with knowledge of the investigation said the officer's interaction with Bolter was not reported to other law enforcement agencies in real time, whether that's because the officer didn't report it, if he didn't think anyone was wrong, or because police radio traffic was so heavy that the transmission didn't go through is currently unknown. Is that really a thing that happens, that radio transmission is so heavy that one transmission will get blocked out entirely, or just that people missed it in the clutter? I don't know. It also wasn't clear what the New Hope officer knew at the time and why she was on her way to Rest's home. So she was on her way to Rest's home probably at 2:36 in the morning because she had heard, hey, somebody's shooting politicians. Check on them. And that's all. The New Hope Police Department has declined several requests to share more information about the interaction. They provided the Star Tribune with a police report on the incident that doesn't make any mention of the encounter with Bolter. That is odd, and I guess court documents have that. The New Hope encounter occurred just minutes after police started reviewing the Ring camera footage from Hoffman's house. The footage, which the Star Tribune reviewed, shows the suspect clearly dressed as an officer with what appeared to be a police vehicle flashing its lights in the driveway. The sound of Bolter allegedly shooting the Hoffmans isn't captured, but as he climbs back into his SUV, someone inside the home says, call 911. Now, the transcript of that 911 call was provided to the Star Tribune this week. It was heavily redacted, but showed Hope Hoffman, recorded Hope Hoffman, telling dispatchers her father was a state senator. A source who has heard the audio of the 911 call said that Hope describes the suspect as impersonating law enforcement and wearing a mask. Body camera footage reviewed by the Star Tribune shows a police officer outside the Hoffman residence watching the Ring camera footage at 2:25 a.m. Inside law enforcement circles, Bolter's interaction with the New Hope officer after the shooting of the Hoffmans was instantly critiqued. A video shared with the Star Tribune that was allegedly passed among officers within days of the shooting includes a clip from the film The Town that shows a group of bank robbers dressed as nuns and wearing silicone masks, which they pull up beside a Boston police officer. The men are holding guns, and the officer stares at them for several seconds before letting them leave. In the modified clip, the logo for the New Hope Police Department is superimposed on the cop car, so they're memeing it already. But yeah, I don't know if I can blame the first cop all alone encountering another, what looks like a cop, without knowing that they're looking for somebody disguised as a cop. The only weirdness is Why doesn't the guy roll down his window? And, quite frankly, probably all the people passing the meme around, if they're cops, and particularly if they're male cops, probably likewise would refuse to roll their window down for a woman cop for some strange reason. But, that's cop culture for you. Mylan Mason. It's M-Y-L-A-N, and the Mason has 2 S's in it. A retired Minneapolis police officer and former police trainer said it's not uncommon for cops to second-guess other officers, especially in high-profile situations, and cautioned against rushing to judgment before knowing all the facts. All right. Mason said that's especially true in this unique situation. She noted it was dark, the car looked like an unmarked police vehicle, and the driver was dressed as a cop. On top of that, the officer was going to check on rest and went to complete that task. There's so many unknowns, Mason said. After, let's see, the next section here. About the same time, officers at the Hoffman residence were reviewing the home security footage. Some police departments began checking on state politicians, like they did at Rest's home. Although it's interesting, there's some implication that was too early on and might not have been related to the earlier shooting and warnings that maybe other state representatives and senators were at risk. 225, they're reviewing the ring footage. 235, this cop is checking on Senate. It sounds like, hey, everybody wellness check on all the state senators in the area. Could have gone out. They just didn't know about the disguised as a cop thing yet. Although the Hoffman's daughter had reported it, and it would take someone to take the initiative to take that information from the 911 operator and give it to the dispatchers, and that's going to take a certain amount of time. 10 minutes is probably not enough. All right. About the same time, officers at the Hoffman residence were reviewing the home security footage. Some police departments began checking on state politicians, and that is about the same time. But it took more than an hour for Brooklyn Park Police to visit Hortman's home. At 3:35 a.m., 2 Brooklyn Park officers arrived at the Hortman residence. Those officers fired at Bolter as he entered the house after shooting Mark Hortman. Okay, so now they got there, they witnessed the shooting, they shoot at Bolter, Bolter enters the house, they stay outside the house. Additional muzzle flashes from Bolter inside the home lit up the entryway, that's why they stayed outside. Despite the gunfire, officers didn't enter the house until 4:38 a.m., according to timestamps on the body cam footage. Instead of entering immediately to check on Melissa Hortman, the officers waited for a drone to be deployed to see if Bolter was inside and if Melissa Hortman was still alive. I understand the inclination to want to send a drone instead, but this is why we give you guys training, guns, bulletproof vests, SWAT teams, etc., helicopters, tanks. You're supposed to go. But he's in there. He could shoot us. He could. But that's why you're supposed to be regarded as heroes. That's why you're wearing all the equipment. That's why everybody's supposed to jump out of your way. That's why everybody's supposed to say you guys are awesome. It's why nobody's allowed to say defund you, all these things. But what are we supposed to do? We see these things like Uvalde and response like this. There's only 2 options, defund or fund. So are we supposed to stand there and say, fund that? I don't know what you're supposed to make of this response. But it can't be defund, apparently. So don't say that. It can just say, maintain the baseline. And, in the meantime, thank you for your service, which sometimes includes not serving, at your discretion. I don't know what to tell you. It's dangerous, no doubt. Don't want to go, no doubt. But, we're all supposedly culturally celebrating the cops because they're the people willing to do it regardless of how crazy it is if it's necessary to protect the public. We'll wait for a drone to protect the public. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. A source familiar with the drone footage said Hortman was shown immobile and curled up on the landing at the top of the stairs because she was dead. At 4:42 a.m., Melissa Hortman was taken out of the house and brought to an ambulance. Thanks. Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley said his officers believed they shot Bolter and he was holed up in the basement. All the more reason to go and shoot him. Get in there. After shooting the Hortmans and the family dog, and some people think that's the worst thing of all, the family dog Gilbert, Bolter allegedly escaped out the back door, which was propped open. He then dumped his mask, wig, and gun and was on the run for 43 hours before being captured. And I got to say, that's another thing. Generally speaking, if you're watching television police dramas or whatever, as far back as the 50s, right? Find out that there's a gunman in the house, and they don't go in because maybe they're not all wearing bulletproof vests. I'm not training all the time for active shooter situations, etc., and not carrying less lethal weapons, not flying helicopters, driving tanks, etc. The old story is, of course, Bolter, this is the police. We have the house blank. What do we have the house? Yeah. Normally, we have you surrounded. Come out with your hands up, right? Something like, dopey like that, right? And now, of course, it's like, Bolter, we know you're in there. We're out here, and we're afraid of you. You've got an hour. We're getting a drone, and we'll see you later, I guess. I'm a little worried about going in the backyard. It's dark. Don't escape out the back door either. We know you might do that. Don't do it. Be honest. We'll be right there. How is the house not stereotypically surrounded? I don't know. Or maybe it was. I don't know. He got by me, boss. I don't know. Neighbor Jeff Olinik. I'm sorry. I'm reading you the stupid cow. You can't tell the difference in the Instapaper version between the captions, as I read to you at the beginning of the thing, and the body of the story. Here's somebody walking their dog behind the Hortmans' home, which is partially boarded up because windows and doors smashed. Bruley said in an interview with the Minnesota Reformer this month that his officers were using de-escalation tactics in the pursuit of Bolter. I see. Right. You don't want to kill the guy who's killing your local elected officials because they're Democrats. A senior law enforcement official who spoke on the condition of anonymity and has been in several active shooter situations. So, right, they train. Said this was not a situation that called for de-escalation, but fit the description of an active shooter. Yeah, you're right. I think about that myself. Now, I have no police training, but there's two words in active shooter, and we know we have a shooter. Is he active? Active enough. Well, we believe he's wounded and in the basement. Well, do you think he's dead? Because that's the inactive shooter. And even if you think he's dead, is the lesson of Uvalde not let's find out? I mean, you called for a drone to find out if Hortman was dead. Anyway, one option, in my view, is to go and make him dead. But, that's a dangerous assignment. And yet, we're funding it, right? We don't defund the police. We fund the police and give them lots of money to do the job because we know you could be killed in the line of duty. But I don't know what to tell you. We can't keep sitting by and watching, police forces play prevent defense at the end of the game here, to use a football analogy for this. Your job is to go in there and do something about it. That's what the vests are for, the training, the helmets, the shields, the tanks, the gas, the flashbang grenades. But, if you think somebody who is a suspect is maybe sleeping in that house, all the grenades are there. It's weird how you find all the grenades when you need them for things like that. A senior law enforcement official, of course, says, hey, that really was an active shooter situation. Thanks, senior law enforcement official. That means officers should have gone into the house to confront Bolter. Brooklyn Park's use of force policy says officers can use deadly force to prevent death or great bodily harm. Kind of what you thought, right? It says de-escalation can only be used when delay will not compromise the safety of someone else, lead to another crime, or result in the suspect's escape. Whoops, well, you failed on all three on those. But 0 out of 3 ain't bad if you think about it. The Brooklyn Park Police Department declined to answer specific questions about the timeline of activity at the Hortman home. In a statement, the department said it's focused on bringing Bolter to justice. Thanks. No, actually, that's the DA. Thank you. They'll take care of that one. And has requested an after-action review of the shooting to highlight both the commendable efforts and areas for improvement. So, congratulations, trophies, participation trophies on their way, inbound for all of you. Mason, the former police trainer, said if officers were trying to save Mark Hortman's life while protecting each other from potential shots from Bolter, the decision to not immediately enter the house is understandable. I think no. Less so. I'll say that. Asked if it seemed reasonable that it took an hour for anyone to physically check on whether Melissa Hortman was still alive, Mason said, it seems like a long time, but I don't know the circumstances of why. And that's true, we don't. But haven't heard anything good about it yet. Let's see. Last section here, I think. Every city was left to its own response. That's not great either, but okay, I understand that one. After he escaped, the dire nature of Bolter's plans was not immediately conveyed to politicians. Several were told to contact local law enforcement for protection, only to learn that their local law enforcement had no idea about the attack. How could that be? Senator Jim Abler was among the first legislators to hear the shootings and get protection. The Republican, that guy got it, said Anoka police knocked on his door at 3 a.m. to warn him a legislator had been shot 35 minutes before officers arrived at the home of Melissa Hortman. My, oh my. Police returned a half hour later, Abler said, and told him, if somebody comes back, call 911 to make sure it's us. Okay. You don't want to leave anybody here? Other lawmakers didn't get such prompt protection, Abler said. He called the DFL senator asking him about her personal safety at 6:30 a.m. I don't really understand how that works out, but hims and hers are a little backwards here. Every city was left to its own response, Abler said. The first widespread dissemination of the information to law enforcement officers was sent about 4:25 a.m. via teletype, to agencies in the 7-county metro area. They know which 7 counties we're talking about. Probably crucial ones at that. Jacobson said it's the only system that exists to get information to every dispatch center. We can maybe do better, but it's a reminder those dispatch centers are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, he said. A high-ranking, I'm not certain what that's supposed to mean, but okay, a high-ranking leader in the state patrol was alerted to the shooting after the Hoffmans by an officer at the scene at 2:37 a.m., according to a source with knowledge of the investigation. Patrol contacted the House and Senate sergeants at arms about the shootings before 4 a.m., according to a spokeswoman. It's unclear how much information the sergeants received or shared with lawmakers. They didn't respond to questions from the Star Tribune. The governor's office, chief of staff Chris Schmitter, reached out to legislative leaders just after 4:30 a.m. warning that violent incidents had taken place at lawmakers' homes. 5 a.m., Jacobson told House and Senate leaders to communicate with their caucuses about the violence as soon as possible, and that the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, how do you like that? Bureau of Criminal Apprehension investigators were being sent to the Hoffman home. An hour and a half later, Jacobson shared a message for legislative leaders to send to their members, warning of a, quote, dangerous individual who made threats against state legislators and prominent figures, but they seem to get those warnings all the time. Some of them are dead now. That would have been helpful. He urged lawmakers to contact their local law enforcement. He did not mention the gunman impersonated a police officer and carried a list of targets. It seems important. Jacobson said the Department of Public Safety received the list of names from Brooklyn Park Police no later than 6:30 in the morning, but it was a rapidly developing situation. It wasn't really all that rapidly developing. It was very slowly developing in some cases. Anyway, I don't know. There's a bit more here, but I'm thinking about hopping out the other side of this article and finishing up. It just doesn't seem like anybody was covered in glory here. And it makes me, like I said, makes me think of Uvalde, but it also makes me think of something else that I've had in the Instapaper knot pocket to share with you. But I don't know. It also makes me think about another ineffective unit of armed whatevers. Although, the bad comparison doesn't make any sense to compare them to the Russian army, but you start to wonder about the effectiveness of these units. But on a grander scale, the Russian army, of course, falling apart, coming apart at the seams during their invasion of Ukraine. And good, I'm glad this time. Not glad that the police departments are falling apart at the seams, but maybe not such a bad thing that the Russian army is. However, I came across an interesting description of something that is absolutely tearing the Russian army apart and undermining its effectiveness, turning it into an absolutely incompetent army, certainly armed force, but which is a nightmare for the people in it. And I just can't imagine just how crazy this whole thing must be. And I did see the other day, and you may have seen on social media, it was shared, one of these weirdo reactionary Republican families who left the United States and became expatriates, moved to Russia because Russia's anti-woke. One of these people. Only the Russians have the strong leadership that can reject woke, and we can't fight the woke here in America. I'm going to move to Russia. It's the only place my family can live by our values, which is crazy. And in fact, it was crazy. They moved to Russia. And by the way, apparently they were assured, oh, yeah, move to Russia. It's great. We'll take care of you. And by the way, in case you were wondering, no, we're not going to draft you and send you into our army and send you to Ukraine to fight for us. And this guy believed it. And he was in his 40s and bringing his family. So I guess probably he thought, yeah, here in America, they probably wouldn't do that to me, which is, good reason to stay. But all right, he went to Russia, and guess what happened? They lied, and they did, in fact, force him to report for military duty, and he went to Ukraine and got killed. So what can I tell you? These things happen. I guess it's not a very smart group of people, but that's what happened. And of course you're going to get killed there, and of course they're going to back out of their promises because they don't care about anything. Russia and Putin, it's crazy. How crazy? This crazy. Chris O _wiki. Chris O wiki is the name of the blue sky poster I'm reading here. The bio says independent military history author and researcher. I don't know anything about him, and I can't really vouch for background or anything, but okay. This seemed like a plausible story, even though it's outrageously insane sounding. Ready for this one? Organized crime. This is not hard to believe in Russia. Organized crime is now thriving in the Russian army, I would say in part, but he says, as a result of its recruitment of tens of thousands of convicts. I think the organized crime is going to thrive in Russian anything, not necessarily just because they recruited tens of thousands of convicts, but because that's how organized crime works. Can't hurt, though, if you're also emptying the prisons of people who were involved in organized crime and that can rejoin their original units. Before they were the units they were assigned to in the Russian army, they belonged to organized crime units. Well, former inmates now extort, rob, and torture soldiers with impunity. Why? Why would you be torturing and robbing and extorting your own comrades without getting into Russian use of the word? And the answer is, of course, because then you can extract millions of rubles in pay and bonuses from them, as two recent accounts highlight. And it's illustrated with a photo here of, I guess, what is a Russian soldier holding a fellow Russian soldier at gunpoint. This person disarmed and forced to squat down on the ground, hands on their head, in the face of an assault weapon held by somebody in their army. This person's not being captured by the Ukrainians here. Alexander Vladimirovich Efremov of the 9th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade told his wife that, quote, if you don't find the money soon, they'll kill me. This is the communications being sent home from soldiers who are supposedly serving their country in the battlefields of Ukraine. Arriving at a location in Ukraine, he was thrown into an open-air pit along with many other men. And I mean, this is crazy. His wife says he spent all his time in a pit And there were boys sitting in there with him. They were beaten every day with clubs and rebar, and money was beaten out of them. They had to write a report that they were volunteering the money to pay for the unit's needs. They force you to write these reports that supposedly it's not under pressure. They know that the Army has its regulations, and this is the cover for them. And I guess they probably also have a friend inside who's like, yeah, these reports are totally legit. But I imagine being sent to the front at all to fight this war, only to find out you don't even end up fighting the war. You're immediately captured by thugs in your own army who keep you alive only because the Army will send a paycheck, or I don't know, maybe cash. Will send pay to these soldiers as long as they're alive, and these guys just hold them prisoner and steal their checks. It's amazing. And of course, they're telling them, well, we'll kill you if you don't do this. And I mean, sometimes maybe in a civilian setting, people would be like, I don't think they really will, or I can get a gun and defend myself or whatever. But in a military setting where they tell you, look, if you got shot, we'll just say Ukrainians shot you. We'll dump your body, maybe bury it right here, and no one will ask questions about how you died. You're at the front in the Ukraine war. So there's nothing stopping us. The threat is as credible as it could possibly get. We'll shoot you if you don't give us the money. And I guess you believe it. You got to, right? So, wow. So then covering for all of this, how come all of this pay is being spent and all these people are, I don't know, they're not sending any money home. They're buying equipment for their unit, but they're not. They're giving it all to the thugs that actually have taken over these units. Alexander was ransomed by another man who had also been beaten, who paid the money for both Alexander and himself. The soldiers tried to file a collective complaint about the criminality of their commanders, and that's one of the other big problems. Sometimes these guys are the legitimate commanders of the unit, and they either were organized crime figures themselves, or I guess are recruited into it by the other organized crime figures. And maybe the recruiting is, we'll shoot you unless you use your authority as officer of this unit, commanding officer of this unit, to make this whole thing work. Order some people to dig the pits so that we can extract them. We'll give you part of the money, or we'll just kill you if you don't do it. Wow. I mean, that's totally insane, obviously. So the soldiers tried to file a collective complaint about the criminality of their commanders, but it only resulted in their humiliation and more beatings. They can't seem to get the word to the generals in the Kremlin, except, well, you know who they're going to be. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Okay, so we were in the middle of telling this horror story that we learned from Chris O. Wiki on Blue Sky, a self-described as a military historian, was it, and researcher. And, I don't know how you get a hold of a story like this, and I guess you got to be a Russian speaker. It would certainly help. But what a nightmare for everybody. I mean, I guess I guess I'm happy that there's no effective fighting force on the ground for the Russians, but I feel terrible for all of these guys who are caught up in this, except that I don't know what to say. I mean, do I feel terrible that they're not able to prosecute the war against Ukraine? No, I feel good about that. But that only adds to the horror of the situation. Like, what are other countries going to do about this? Nothing. I don't know if they're in any position to do anything about it. And the real politic of it is good. They're unable to fight the war in Ukraine or anywhere else. But yet, universally speaking, there's some serious injustice going on here. But, there's serious injustice going on everywhere that the U.S. can and in some cases can't do anything about. And, even in the ones that you can do something about, you sometimes just don't for various reasons. And some of the reasons are good and some of the reasons are horrible. But they happen. But this is just, what can I tell you? There's tremendous injustice in the world. I'm sorry, I can't fix any of that, but I don't know. I just thought you might find this interesting too. It's kind of beyond imagining, but it's very easy to envision if it's described to you. It would make a hell of a movie, that's for sure. But it isn't a movie. It's happening in real life. There's more to it too, by the way. According to his wife, an unknown officer came to them, and I think the wife we're talking about here is, I don't know, either Alexander, the main protagonist, or the friend who managed to pay a ransom for himself and Alexander. But according to his wife, an unknown officer came to them and singled out the complainants. Right? They managed to get a message out to commanding officers in Moscow. Look what they're doing to us. You got to help. Well, they intercepted it, and guess what happens? They come to them, singled them out. They put a skirt on a boy who wanted to write a complaint, put a bulletproof vest on him, and wrote obscene words on his vest. And they beat him publicly, demonstratively, right on the parade ground. So, complainers, this is what happens to you. Alexander was thrown back into the pit when he tried to pass on a complaint to the military prosecutor's office and was told that he would have to pay another $1 million to get out again. Evgeny Anatolyevich Rudnev, a Storm V fighter, whatever that might be, with the 33rd Motorized Rifle Regiment, says that he had to desert temporarily. That's also probably not good for your military readiness, right? He had to desert temporarily in order to get medical treatment for a serious leg wound. Those things will happen in a war, right? The wound, anyway. You got to desert to get treatment. Wow. He was tracked down and forcibly returned unhealed to Donetsk, which is something you could also very easily imagine the legitimate Russian military authorities doing to you as well without deserting. You went to the hospital and then they were like, no, we need somebody to stand here and hold a rifle. Well, I'll die of gangrene. Yeah, well, that's life in the Russian army. But no, this is the criminal elements. He says he was locked in a room for a week with other wounded soldiers before being pushed into a car. They took me to this barn, the so-called VPD, I don't really know what that is, where they keep our sick people. Conditions in the VPD turned out to be terrible. The facility was crowded with wounded soldiers who were being denied treatment. According to Rudnev, despite the appalling conditions, most of the wounded tried to stay there. Why? In order to avoid getting sent out on combat missions. Yeah, I can see that. The ceiling, he says, is supported by logs so that it doesn't fall. They don't treat you there either. It's impossible to get treatment there, but people need operations. They just sit there. When the salary comes, the officers collect extortions from them by any means. They offer for you to stay so that you don't have to go, I guess, to the front and fight and possibly be killed there. Basically, everyone tries to pay so that they can just lie in the medical battalion and not go to the assault. This is, I guess, translations from Russian. It's a little stilted, but you get the idea. Rudnev says that the medical battalion was controlled by former convicts who took bribes to allow soldiers to have various privileges denied to others, such as using their mobile phones in the facility. They spent the money on cars, alcohol, and drugs. Because why not? You're in the middle of a war, right? And I hear a conversation that Lezgin, Lezgin, and I don't know, it's patron or patron, like the tequila, but these two, I guess, commanders, these are their organized crime nicknames, perhaps, Lezgin and Patron, stole $7 million on their card. Where they stole it from, I don't know. None of them go to depots or anywhere. They just sit in this shed, ride around there, walk, go on vacation as they please, drink something. So these guys are really ruling the roost and buying alcohol, drugs, cars, etc., just leaving the war. I'm going to go on vacation to Florida. I'm going to go to Sunny Isles, Florida, and the Trump Towers there and hang out for a little while, take a vacation from this war that I'm not fighting, and I'm not letting anybody else fight either. No wonder they can't win this war. Thank God. Except for the torture they're putting people through, I guess. They lined us up at midnight on this shed. There were about 30 of us lined up, something like 40. They took everyone's phones. They very persistently demanded the passcodes for their phones. At the end, when they took all the phones, they put me in the middle of a circle and started explaining that it was because of me that they were taking all these phones, etc. That is, they are creating a conflict situation. They are setting the department against me with all this. After this, other soldiers began threatening Rudyev with violence, and he continued to experience pressure from the commanders. He decided to desert again, as by now he feared for his life, and that is the end of the story. Then the sources are provided, although they are in Russian. It was just startling, and I guess I saw this. This is 10 days ago when I first saw this thing. July 18th was when it was posted, and I put it away, and it was, wasn't important and pressing news, but Tuesday seemed like a good day to bring this up. I just found that fascinating and helps explain, I think, some of what we're seeing in terms of the Russian army's inability to not only to win this war, but to prosecute it efficiently. Worse situation than we're experiencing with our protective services here in the United States, but I don't know. It came to mind that these weird nightmare scenarios of stuff that you just never imagined would happen. That's not our, as one of our sound effects will tell us that is not how this works. Yeah, typically, no, it isn't, and yet that's what's happening. It's just bizarre, and I don't know. I thought I would sneak in, and you might find it an interesting addition to the regular terrible news that's going on in the world, and here in the United States in particular. Okay. Let me head back over to Instapaper and review some of the other things that I had as top fresh activity in our particular hell here in the United States. Let's see. A new. I don't know what to tell you. You know what? We haven't done Epstein's story yet for today. So here is one angle on Jeffrey Epstein. The visit between Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, totally bizarre, and Ghislaine Maxwell, who I've heard like 3 or 4 more new pronunciations of her name as well. And this time I think I saw interview footage with Virginia, is it Giuffre, who the unfortunately most famous victim of Maxwell and Epstein, who of course recently took her own life, but prior to that, as an adult, giving an interview about just what a nightmare Maxwell is and why she belonged in prison and should be getting a long sentence. And I think we can probably rely on her pronunciation, but it was kind of odd and I couldn't quite make it out. It wasn't exactly Elaine and it wasn't Ghislaine, but it had the very weird soft G of Ghislaine. So I don't know. And it's not somebody I care to pronounce correctly, I guess. But at any rate, this weird situation which unfolded in dispatching the Deputy Attorney General here to interview Maxwell to find out what she knows, even though we have had that trial already and we kind of know what she knows. But I guess she had clammed up and refused to testify against certain other people, but now they thought they might be able to pry something out of her. You know, if there's something in this hand that we might put in your hand that might make you decide to talk to us or tell us exactly what we want to hear or allow us the opportunity to pretend we heard it from you, that might, result in a better situation for you with the corrupt pardoning president in hand. And remember that, what's his name? What's the name of that guy who didn't make it as U.S. attorney? Ed Martin is the pardons attorney now. So Ed Martin's name will crop up again if we ever have the terrible misfortune to finally have to report to you that Maxwell has been pardoned or had her sentence commuted here. But Harry Litman and his Talking Feds Substack is describing the unusual nature, let's say, of this dispatching of the Deputy Attorney General to visit with Maxwell. By the way, Dick Durbin, I think, finding his feet with this to some extent. You never know. It might just all result in a strongly worded letter. but I'll have to make a note to myself here to find Durbin's demand, I suppose, of the Justice Department. You need to release the tapes, the video or audio tapes of this interview between Blanche and Maxwell. And apparently they did tape it, which, thank God, I guess. I had some doubt that they would actually follow protocol there and just, have a secret interview, and then out comes Todd Blanche. And guess what? You'll never believe it. Ghislaine Maxwell says Obama did the whole thing. And of course, that's what Trump is pretending now. His new line about the Epstein files is, well, I'm not releasing them because they're forgeries anyway. The Democrats wrote them about me. Obama and Comey and all the rest, they made up the Epstein files, and they pretended I did these things. And by the way, did you know that he says now saying Bill Clinton visited the island 28 times? Can you believe it? No, of course I can't believe it. Certainly not if you say it. And, again, a good point made on Blue Sky just yesterday, Ian Boudreau saying what you're actually watching happen here is that the Trump is there saying the last guys in charge made stuff up about me and put it in the Epstein files. And then 2 days later, he's like, Bill Clinton went to the island 28 times. Can you believe this? No, I can't. You just said, every Republican accusation is a confession. You just said made up the stuff in the Epstein files. Hey, can you believe this one? No, I believe you just made that up. Anyway, this thing, though, I'm looking at is Harry Litman talking about this interview with the Deputy Attorney General, which is being described in the papers as strange or unusual, which it is, but again, you could stretch a little bit. It's strange, unusual, doesn't really tend to capture it. Litman's headline is strange, try indefensible. And here's how it's described. The subheader reads, Todd Blanche's visit to Ghislaine Maxwell isn't just a breach of protocol. People aren't really describing it that way either. It was a betrayal of public trust and his oath of office. Oh, that's different. Todd Blanche, the sitting Deputy Attorney General, DAG for short, of the United States, and until recently Donald Trump's personal defense attorney, yes, flew to Tallahassee last week for a 2-day in-person interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence for her integral role facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's notorious sex trafficking of underage girls, things that Virginia Giuffre and others, I forget who it was that just the other day came out, but the two sisters who likewise have been waiting for years for someone to take them seriously and hear out their testimony that Maxwell herself sexually abused the two of them. Direct evidence against her, not just facilitating Epstein's story. But anyway, all very strange. And reporters, as Litman points out here, called the visit odd, unusual, and striking, interestingly enough. But those descriptions don't come close to capturing either the bizarreness of the visit or, more importantly, its impropriety. It's an indication of how corrupt the DOJ has gotten, that we noticed the anomaly but didn't register the outrage. For starters, this will help you do it, I guess. Blanche's junket wasn't just odd, it was off the charts bizarre. Deputy Attorneys General do not interview witnesses. That isn't what that isn't what they do. Assistant United States attorneys and investigative agents do that. The Deputy Attorney General, not in your job description. The DAG's job is not to investigate. It's managerial. It's policy, supervision, and oversight. The DAG gives keynote speeches, fields crisis calls, and steers the department through complex interagency waters. Interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell? That's not in the job description. It's not even in the same building as the job description. So what was Blanche doing with Ghislaine Maxwell? That's the question we should all be asking. And yet we're not. We're just reporting the fact that, well, that's what happened. They did an interview. Now, you could say that the interview isn't going to result in anything or they're going to make that stuff. Well, you can, you should, you eventually will have to. But yeah, he's saying we skipped the step where we're saying, what? But that's because we aren't all Department of Justice insiders. And The deputy attorney general is doing it. Well, they must be taking it really seriously there. But I guess it's sort of like, I don't know, if you said, the traveling secretary of the, I don't know, do they have traveling secretaries? I think it's old-timey traveling secretaries of a baseball team. If the person who arranges the charter jets, I don't know, for a professional baseball team going to do a West Coast, stand or whatever, it says, you know what, I'll make the lineup. Why not? I'll take a stab at it. Well, no, it's just not the kind of thing that happens. And of course, it's a bad analogy because a baseball game is not that important. What if they did make the lineup? Probably wouldn't be so bad, of course. But just in terms of the impropriety of it, and anybody who's an insider at the DOJ would be like, this is not what this guy does. Why are they sending him to do this? And it bespeaks an initial intent to screw this up and to come up with some garbage claim coming out of this interview. It's about as obvious a signal as there could be. So what was he doing with Maxwell? That's the question we should all be asking, because unless the answer is advancing the interests of the United States, then he had no business being there. Of course, he was there because he was once Donald Trump's personal defense lawyer, and he's advancing the interests of Donald Trump, really. But, okay, the writing just puts it this way. He has no business being there unless it was advancing the interests of the United States. In plain view, Blanche was leveraging his position as the second highest official in the Department of Justice and the power entrusted to him by the people to betray their interest in favor of his true client, Donald Trump. He was operating as Trump's personal emissary, part of an all-hands-on-deck effort by the Trump White House to contain the firestorm surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell herself, and whatever secrets might still burn beneath the surface. The meeting was plainly a form of negotiation between Maxwell and Blanche, her information for the hope of the DOJ's favorable treatment. According to multiple reports, Maxwell was granted some form of limited immunity in exchange for talking to Blanche. That's valuable consideration. Real legal benefit conferred in exchange for information. And the cost of that benefit is borne entirely by the American people in the form of the diminished ability to prosecute future crimes and weakened leverage over Maxwell herself. So again, what did the people of the United States get in return? The answer, again, seems to be nothing. No new charges, no public disclosures, just a possible card for Blanche or the DOJ to play to aid the personal political fortunes of the president. And that brings us to the real issue here, not just the meeting itself, but the nonchalant bastardization of the Justice Department's mission from investigating and prosecuting crimes on behalf of the people to political fixers on behalf of the president, with Blanche as fixer-in-chief. His conduct suggests he still sees himself as Trump's lawyer, only now with the full power of the Justice Department behind him, which is, a huge problem. Just as like we were saying the other day, the mental decline of President Trump has now put us in a position where, what if the grandpa in the assisted living facility who's complaining that aliens are coming down from their spaceship and stealing all his money is given investigative authority through command of the DOJ and FBI? Not, okay, Grandpa, we'll try and take care of you anyway and try to put your mind at ease about the aliens or whatever. But no, we need to actually have the FBI investigate the aliens. Sure. Okay. Like every other DOJ official, Blanche swore an oath to well and faithfully discharge the duties of his office. Longstanding authority, including DOJ internal guidance, makes clear that faithfully is a command to serve the public interest and not the interest of any individual, including the president. As former Attorney General Ben Civiletti put it, the client of the Department of Justice is the people of the United States, not the president who appointed us. Blanche's trip turned that principle on its head. Every aspect of it seemed aimed at shielding the president from political damage from the Epstein scandal. And Maxwell is obviously angling to barter her information for some reduction in sentence or even commutation. Again, Blanche is in the official position to make that happen only as an agent of the people of the United States, not a political operative for Trump. He has no business trading a public good for the private political benefit to Trump of a certain spin on the information. Then consider the unverified report that Blanche was the only government representative at the interview. Just him, Maxwell, and Maxwell's attorney, David Marcus, a personal acquaintance of Blanche's, by the way. No accompanying FBI agents, no DOJ attorney, no line prosecutor, no formal record of the meeting. Not even a suggestion that Blanche memorialize the contents in a memo. Just a private, undocumented interview between the Deputy Attorney General and a convicted criminal who was sitting on information that could be politically damaging to Blanche's former and likely current client, Donald J. Trump. Now that contradicts the story that we had heard about whether or not there were tapes. Although it may be that Durbin is just saying, I can't believe you would go in there without any tapes, so you better turn over whatever you did make. And I guess it's possible that they were like, nope, we turned the machine off for that one. Let's see, I have something from The Hill here about that. Alexander Bolton wrote about it just yesterday. Durbin demands recordings of Ghislaine Maxwell Department of Justice talks. Let's see if they're certain that they exist or if it's just speculative. Senate Judiciary Committee ranking member, of course, Dick Durbin, is demanding DOJ turn over all recordings, transcripts, and notes from its interviews with Maxwell. You know who that is, of course. Durbin is raising the alarm over Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's interview with Maxwell, calling it highly unusual, if not unprecedented. Well, that's still too lame a description. But anyway, let's see. And it's odd, of course, that Deputy Attorney General will go instead of some line prosecutors who are familiar with all the details of the case, who can more readily determine if the witness is lying. In light of troves of corroborating evidence collected through multiple investigations, a federal jury conviction, and Ms. Maxwell's history and willingness to lie under oath as it relates to her dealings with Epstein, why would DOJ depart from longstanding precedent and now seek her cooperation? Durbin asks in the letter, also signed by Sheldon Whitehouse, top dem on the Judiciary Federal Courts Subcommittee. They warned that, she could be lying. They're asking for, I guess, any record, but it's not clear that they are certain that it exists. I guess that's still a big hole. And so they're demanding any notes, provide all recordings, transcripts, reports of investigations, and other notes pertaining to interviews with Maxwell that took place on July 24th and 25th. They also asked for recordings and transcripts from any prior interviews and a complete description of any oral or written agreements that the DOJ entered into with Maxwell regarding past or future interviews. So I guess it's still possible the DOJ may say, we didn't do it, we didn't record anything, which I believe they might not have, which would be amazing. Although I'll bet Maxwell's lawyer did, because as you know, in the legal community, they all know if you're dealing with Trump or Trump's lawyers, you got to record everything. Wow. Anyway, back to Harry Litman's description of just how crazy and bad this whole thing is. There is no benign explanation for this breach of the most basic protocol. Blanche served for 8 years as a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, or as Greg always reminds us, they sometimes call it the Sovereign District of New York. In other words, there's no better training for real, true departmental procedure than that, but to hell with it. Any prosecutor learns in their first week on the job that you can't conduct an interview alone. If the reports are accurate, the likelier explanation is this: the meeting was kept secret to avoid political fallout or to prevent the creation of a record that might prove embarrassing. Except the information belongs to the American people. It's gathered in their interest and used in their interest. But they're ignoring all of that. That interest looks increasingly compromised. The suspicion that Maxwell has damaging information about Trump and that Blanche's real role is to contain it only deepens when we recall Trump's own coded outreach. To be clear, there is no public evidence that Trump has participated in any criminal activity related to Epstein or Maxwell, but When Maxwell was arrested and charged with lurid crimes, Trump didn't express outrage. He didn't side with the victims. He said he wished her well. Trump is a master of coded communication with convicts, and he doesn't offer up that kind gesture accidentally or sincerely. It's his version of an outreach to someone whom he wants not to give dirt to investigators, right? Usually he just says, I don't care. They can rot in hell for all I care. I don't know this person, but why wish her well? It's not, well, I wish her well because he confesses that she's got the dirt on him. It's a message. Well, I hope nothing bad happens to you in prison, because that can happen. Some people find they befall an accident there, for instance. He's not quite that outrageous. He executed a similar coded outreach to Michael Cohen, criticizing the search of his property as a disgrace and calling him and telling him to stay strong. Well, he didn't. Similarly, he's sent unsubtle messages over the years to others. We'll tell you who after this.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio for our last segment. Still in the middle of reading from Harry Litman the bizarre nature of the decision to send Todd Blanche, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, of all people, to conduct this also wrongly conducted interview with rightly convicted sex offender Ghislaine Maxwell. There's something wrong with every level of this. DAGs don't do this work. Todd Blanche used to represent Trump as his personal defense attorney, still seems to be working and laboring under the illusion that he is still Trump's personal attorney, not only violating protocol by going as DAG, but also violating protocol by not bringing any of the normal people you would bring to such an interview under normal circumstances, and maybe not even recording any of it. And in the end, everybody is pretty much justified in assuming that he's there to use the leverage on loan to him as a public official to collect information that belongs, if it exists, to the people of the United States for the purpose of prosecuting crimes committed by others, instead to cover up those crimes and cover up the crimes perhaps committed by others in connection with this person. A very, let's say, like the newspapers say, unusual situation. It's unusual for the Deputy Attorney General to cover up other people's crimes. Yes, it is unusual. And Harry Litman's point here is, that's not, I mean, it is unusual. That's not incorrect. The problem is it's wildly unconstitutional and corrupt, and the people who do it belong in prison for doing it. But we don't say those things in the reports, the news reports, relaying the fact of the event here. And that in itself is unusual, don't you think? So, a good point also being made here as we left for the break, that Trump is a master of coded communications with convicts, and he doesn't offer up that sort of kind gesture, wishing Maxwell well, right? doesn't offer that up accidentally or sincerely. It's his version of outreach to someone with whom he wants, outreach to someone whom he wants not to give dirt to investigators. He did it with Michael Cohen initially, telling him to stay strong until Cohen decided not to, and then that guy's a jerk, we should execute him for treason. Similarly, he's sent unsubtle messages over the years to witnesses and co-defendants, such as praise for Roger Stone's guts, sympathy for Paul Manafort's suffering, even a public promise to take care of those who stay loyal. In that context, Blanche's prison visit looks less like a DOJ fact-finding mission and more like a coded message to Maxwell. Stay strong, you're not forgotten. The Department of Justice is not a private law firm. It doesn't run errands. It doesn't perform client service. It acts in accordance with the Constitution and long-standing norms and on behalf of the American people as a whole, or at least it used to. None of this could possibly be lost on Blanche, a former assistant U.S. attorney and high-level defense attorney. He knows the rules of the road and the fundamental responsibility of DOJ to serve the public interest. We've reached the point where the department's highest officials are violating the most fundamental principles of justice, casually and without a trace of shame. Actually, it reminds me a little bit of what we're witnessing in the Russian army, right? What happens if the people who are supposed to have the authority to make these decisions just happen to be installed in these positions of power with the understanding that, yeah, you're coming here as a corrupt individual. You have corrupt designs. You're being appointed to the position by a corrupt president, and you're meant to use this power for corrupt purposes. Well, unfortunately, the rest of the system is built around the assumption of the rest of law enforcement and the rest of the citizenry that the DOJ must have good reason to be doing what it's doing. And we, of course, have also built up a practice of not demanding of the DOJ that they always answer for their actions. Oh, they need to have certain amounts of secrecy and prosecutorial discretion, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what if you just install an entire department's worth of bad actors? Well, that would never happen because there are people there who are career employees. Well, what if you fired them? Well, that would never happen because there's the Merit Systems Protection Board. Well, what if you fired all the Merit Systems Protection Board? I mean, it's literally how this stuff is going down. And, you know, it's kind of been looming as a possibility for a long time, longer than Trump's been in office. I mean, I worried about the same things when Bush and Cheney were in office. And then, of course, the leopard stayed around long enough to eat Cheney's face. But he too. What if we, fired all the people who were against us? What if we cooked the intelligence books on this? What if we purged the system of political appointees? What if we put in our own people who would do and say things like, what was that guy's name? I'm already losing track of the evil villains from the Trump administration who are still around here too. Who am I thinking of? The other foreign-sounding guy, and it's not Emil Bove, who's the villain of the day, but Hans von Spakovsky, right? That's what I was thinking of. In the much, more niche area of civil rights law and voting rights law, the government has the power to preemptively and presumptively, I guess I should say, declare when there's a voting rights violation going on in one of the states. What if you put a racist in charge of that and he could use the stamp of approval, to make a physical metaphor out of it? If it's okay to redistrict along facially discriminatory lines, so long as this stamp is put on the paper from the DOJ, and you started thinking about, well, what if we essentially stole the stamp and gave it to someone who was an avowed racist and let them handle it, and he stamped all the racially motivated gerrymanders? What could we do about it? And the answer is we've built a system where almost nothing can be done about it? Well, what if we applied this lesson to everything else, not only in the Department of Justice, but across the board in all departments? What if we just didn't pay people? What if we just dismissed everybody? What if we fired everybody in the Merit Systems Protection Board? What if the courts said, well, then the courts would say you can't. What if we told the courts, F you? What if we caught on record 3 people at the Department of Justice saying, yes, Emil Bove did tell us to tell judges F you. Well, what if we made that guy a judge and he threw out the case against himself with 3 witnesses saying that he said F the judges? Well, what if you just kept going? What if you just fired everybody? What if you just killed people? What if you did shoot people in the middle of Fifth Avenue? Then people would say he's delivering on his promises and he's a strong leader. Oh my. Well, it can get a little bit out of hand. But okay, we're almost at the end of Harry Litman's recounting of all of this. But that's what it's reminded me of, right? Remember, none of this could be possibly lost on Blanche. He's worked in the DOJ before, been an assistant U.S. attorney. He knows the rules of the road and the fundamental responsibility of DOJ to serve the public interest. We've reached the point where the department's highest officials are violating the most fundamental principles of justice casually and without a trace of shame. When the number 2 official at DOJ can openly act as the president's political fixer, when the most sensitive facts and the most radioactive scandal of our time can be quietly gathered, shaped, or suppressed by the very people meant to investigate them, we've passed the guardrails of ordinary dysfunction. We have a right to answers, and if we surrender it, if we chalk it up to just another odd episode in the Trump-era DOJ, we won't just be surrendering accountability. We'll be surrendering the idea that justice belongs to the people and accepting that Donald Trump is entitled to play by different rules. That's not politics as usual. It's the foundation of authoritarianism. And he's right. So I thought I'd put him on the record with it because it's a good one, chilling though it may be. All right. Well, there are other stories to share with you as well. Let me jump back into Insta Paper and choose between the competing different directions we can go. Let's stay on this theme, I guess. Which one will you? Well, I mentioned Emil Bove, so we'll go to that story next. Washington Post write-up of what's going on. And it's pretty wild as well. Now, more whistleblower evidence here suggesting that Trump judicial nominee Emil Bove misled the Senate, which is supposed to, stand in the way of your confirmation to the federal bench, let's say, and yet won't because there's 53 votes to play with, and though they'll lose 3, they'll manage to put together a majority anyway, and if it were a 50-50 tie, they would be able to call on the vice president to do this anyhow. So it's a very high barrier to clear, to get in the way of Emil Bove's investiture as a judge. A third whistleblower has new information about a Justice Department official the president has nominated to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. This, again, reported in the Washington Post. It's Perry Stein and Theodoric Meyer. A new whistleblower has come forward to challenge the federal judicial nomination of Emil Bove, sharing evidence with lawmakers suggesting the controversial former attorney for Donald Trump and current top justice official, just like Todd Blanche, misled lawmakers during his confirmation hearing last month, the one for this job. The whistleblower, whose existence has not been previously reported, presented documentation that contradicts claims Bove made before the Senate Judiciary Committee about a Justice Department prosecution. The Washington Post reviewed the evidence and agreed to withhold details to protect the identity of the whistleblower, whose lawyers spoke on condition of anonymity because of the whistleblower's fear of retribution, which is the reason for everybody seeking anonymity, no matter what explanation they may give. Trump formally nominated Bove for a seat on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit in June. A full Senate vote is expected this week. A faster timeline than most other judicial nominations, as it turns out. The information follows revelations from 2 other Justice Department whistleblowers who have said Bove told subordinates in a meeting in this March, that they may need to ignore court orders that would hamper Trump's campaign to deport millions of undocumented immigrants One of those whistleblowers, ousted Justice Department Attorney Erez Rouhani, has since gone public with his account. The new whistleblower has offered information about Bove's behavior regarding a different Justice Department matter, so he's a jerk on more than one thing. Emil Bove is a highly qualified judicial nominee who has done incredible work at the Department of Justice to help protect civil rights, dismantle foreign terrorist organizations, and make America safe again, said Justice Department spokesman Gates McGavick. Whatever. In a statement, he will make an excellent judge. The department's loss will be the Third Circuit's gain. Sounds like he's an AI chatbot, but his name is supposedly Gates McGavick. Sure. Merrill Stubing, your captain. I don't know why that comes to mind, but okay. Trump has nominated Bove, the president's former defense attorney, who represented him in 3 of the 4 criminal cases against him, to a lifetime appointment to the Third Circuit, which takes cases from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and the Virgin Islands. Virgin Islands? Wait a minute. Well, true. And actually, that is the case. And anybody know of anything, any hot topics that might involve the jurisdiction of the Virgin Islands these days? Now, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey as well, also places where Trump could face criminal liability for various other things. Bedminster, New Jersey, who knows? Delaware incorporation of various LLCs, could be anything, right? Bove serves as a senior official in the Justice Department currently, where he has been at the center of efforts to fire career prosecutors, craft legal strategy on immigration, and drop federal corruption charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams. You know, all controversial things that just aren't done, but that are also laying the foundation for authoritarianism, as Harry Littman has illustrated for us. Senate Democrats have spent weeks trying to persuade Republicans to sink Bove's nomination, arguing that he would prioritize the president's agenda over properly enforcing the law. They also have complained that Republicans have rushed his nomination. So far, Republicans have largely dismissed allegations against Bove, including the claims by Rouhani, who was fired in April after he admitted at a court hearing that the administration mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which they did. An undocumented man, as you know, living in Maryland, Abrego was flown to a prison in El Salvador despite a court order barring that move. Officials charged him with 2 crimes related to human smuggling. He's in federal custody now, back in the United States. In his whistleblower complaint, Rouhani said Bove stressed to all in attendance at the March meeting that the planes need to take off no matter what. And the Justice Department attorneys may have to tell judges, F you, and ignore court orders to achieve Trump's immigration goals. The Justice Department and Bove have denied that account, and the White House has remained steadfast behind his nomination. And by the way, we'll throw into the mix here the stuff we discussed the other day, that it may have been that at that point, Bove was conveying the president's instructions that these planes have to take off no matter what, because more important than obeying the law and the Constitution here in the United States is we want to set them up to use as prisoner exchange fodder. Whether or not they knew at the time, and by the way, that means freeing a triple murderer and bringing him to the United States and setting him loose in Florida. By the way, all points bulletin to the police in Florida, he may be impersonating a police officer and assassinating Democratic lawmakers there. But don't worry about it. If he is, we'll let you know. We're not sure. There's no reason to believe that. But if it happens, there's also no reason to panic. Just sit tight and a drone will take care of it. Anyway, back to the story. Democrats argue that an attorney who advocates defying court orders is unfit to serve on the federal bench. But Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley has said that even if Rouhani's account is mostly true, it doesn't disqualify Bove. It does. According to Senator Cory Booker's office, the latest whistleblower shared evidence first with Booker, a Judiciary Committee member who represents New Jersey. Booker and other Democrats have reviewed the evidence, multiple Senate staffers told the Post, which Booker has publicly described as significant. We have substantial information relevant to the truthfulness of the nominee, Booker said in a speech on the Senate floor ahead of the preliminary vote on Bove's nomination. At the time, he invited his Republican colleagues to review the claims. None immediately took him up on his offer, Senate staffers said. Later on, by the way, when they actually held the vote in committee, I believe Booker was still speaking prior to the vote when Grassley just basically said, I'm tired of this. We're having the vote, and started calling the roll in the middle of Booker's speech to the committee, which is a bit amazing all by itself. Grassley's staff met Monday with the whistleblower's lawyers after days of back and forth and reviewed a summary of the whistleblower's allegations so that he could say, I've reviewed them, and then ignore them, I guess. But Grassley's staff was not allowed to review the underlying evidence, said Grassley's spokeswoman Claire Slattery. Booker never approached Grassley directly about the whistleblower's evidence, Slattery said. But I mean, do you have to? It's out there. You read the papers, don't you? The whistleblower's attorneys said that they had offered to allow Grassley to review the full evidence, though not his staffers alone. These 11th hour allegations, which were shared in advance with Democrats in the media, but not with the chairman and his staff, reek of a bad faith attempt to sink a nominee who's already received committee approval, Slattery said in a statement. Yeah, and that's their usual go-to ploy. But the reason it's an 11th hour allegation is probably the whistleblower thought the other two whistleblowers will almost certainly sink him. Two people going on record to say that he said, you tell those judges, F you, we're doing this regardless of your ruling. Oh, that didn't stop him? Well, you know, the 11th hour is the most dramatic time to try to stop something, but the 12th hour is of no use to me. So, yeah, sometimes these things happen at the 11th hour. Booker and whistleblower advocates have said the government whistleblowers have been hesitant to come forward with allegations of wrongdoing because, of course, they fear they could lose their jobs, receive threats, and that their complaints may not be taken seriously, which is what's happening. Another whistleblower has come forward with evidence that raises serious concerns with Emil Bove's misconduct. This is another damning indictment of a man who should never be a federal judge, and Senate Republicans will bear full responsibility for the consequences if they rubber stamp Bove's nomination, said Josh Sorbet, a spokesman for Dick Durbin, the top Dem on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Last week, two Republicans, Murkowski and Collins, were deeply concerned, and they voted against taking up Bove's nomination and have indicated they'll oppose his confirmation. But Democrats need two additional Republicans to block Bove if all senators are voting. Republicans hold a 53-47 Senate majority, after all. Dems had hoped to sway Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who's not running for re-election. So he's free to do, vote his conscience, but he's voting not to be threatened by Trump. Tillis opposed Trump's nomination of Ed Martin to be D.C. U.S. Attorney because of Martin's support for the pro-Trump rioters who attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, forcing the White House to pull his nomination, but then make him pardon attorney and in charge once again, putting himself at the center of everything, in charge of Trump's handling of any commutation or pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell in the middle of the Jeffrey Epstein situation. But Tillis told reporters this month that he does not have the same problem with Bove, saying he didn't trip the switch on January 6th. Oh, didn't he, though? I wonder if you can't find a connection. And I'm not certain that there isn't one either, by the way. So far, Tillis has not responded to requests to review the evidence from the third whistleblower, the whistleblower's attorney said. A spokesman for Tillis did not respond to a request for comment, so that's the end. I said there's lots of other things waiting in the wings, and another Justice Department situation hanging out there as well. Let's go to The Hill. Zach Schoenfeld has this story. Justice Department, and this is all over the place now. I don't know why I have The Hill's version, but I do. Justice Department files formal complaint. Who are they? Who is the Justice Department putting the full weight of the government behind complaining about now? Is it a drug dealer? Is it a human smuggler? Is it a gang member? Someone from Trinidad, MS-13 perhaps? What do you think? No, the complaint is against Judge Boasberg, whose name you've heard because he had the temerity to rule against the administration at some point in the recent past in what they consider to be an important case. So it's not enough that they can take these decisions and take them to the appeals court and get them either reversed there, or if the appeals court is like, no, there's nothing wrong with this, he's absolutely right. They can take it to the Supreme Court and they can say, we're not going to tell you the reasons, we're just reversing him. Boom. But that's not enough for them. They're tired of having to ask the Supreme Court to rule against them for no apparent reason, rule against this judge for no apparent reason, and to do it in secret, more or less. The Justice Department has filed a formal complaint on Monday accusing U.S. District Judge James Boasberg of misconduct and demanding that he be removed from a high-profile deportation case and face reprimand. And they note later on, also Trump says, yeah, and we should impeach him too. Boasberg has long faced the ire of President Trump, who at one point called for Boasberg's impeachment over his handling of the case. But Monday's letter escalates tensions with Trump's Justice Department, which newly demands Boasberg be investigated and referred for appropriate discipline. And golly, who do they have in mind for doing the investigation? Oh, themselves. Wow, that is weird. Judge Boasberg's actions have harmed the integrity and public confidence in the integrity of the judiciary. Justice Department Chief of Staff Chad Mizell wrote in a 5-page complaint, which was obtained by The Hill. The complaint centers on comments Boasberg reportedly made to fellow judges at a March 11th meeting of the Judicial Conference, the federal judiciary's policymaking arm. The Federalist, a conservative outlet, earlier this month reported that Boasberg said, ready for this? He said he was concerned that the administration would disregard rulings of federal courts, leading to a constitutional crisis. What a jerk! I can't believe that he said he was worried that they might disregard federal courts, even though we're right at this very moment considering the nomination to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals of a DOJ official who 2 whistleblowers say told all the attorneys at the DOJ, we may have to disregard, as a matter of policy, we may have to instruct you to disregard rulings from the federal bench. If it gets in our way, we're going to do it. And Boasberg said, I think they might be serious. Result? Confirmation of Beauvais to the Third Circuit, probably, and charges allegedly being brought against Boasberg for saying, I think Beauvais serious. Wow. Imagine that. How can both of those things happen? Oh, I don't know. There's no logic. LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. All right, there's a little bit of that involved. Sure. Okay, so, wow, that seems rather remarkable. The Justice Department's new complaint alleges Boasberg, an appointee of former President Obama, violated ethical obligations to promote public confidence in the integrity of the judiciary and refrain from public comments about matters pending in any court. Now, think about what the charge is here. Well, you violated an ethical obligation to promote public confidence in the integrity of the judiciary. Wait a minute. No, I didn't. I actually did promote public confidence in the integrity of the judiciary. I told my fellow judges, hey, I'm worried that we'll hand down perfectly valid rulings here, and the federal government and the DOJ will ignore our rulings. Oh, well, you're undermining public confidence in the integrity of the judiciary. No, I'm undermining public confidence in the integrity of the executive, the DOJ. The judiciary, I think, will hand down the correct rulings, although not if you're asking the Supreme Court. But the judiciary will hand down a correct ruling. The DOJ will ignore it. How is that undermining the integrity of the judiciary? And the answer is, well, we're the DOJ. So we say it can't possibly be the case that we're the ones who are undermining confidence in the judicial or the legal system writ large. And see, there's different components to the legal system. The executives and the judiciary all have a hand in that. And of course, the legislative creating the laws, yes, but true. But we're just focusing on, the courtroom aspects of things. The executive comes and prosecutes the case. The judiciary decides the case. If the judiciary decides the case and the executive says, to hell with it, F them, whose integrity is being undermined? I guess everybody's, but who's at fault? And to take that and say, aha, you told everybody that we were undermining the legal system. That's one strike against you, pal. We're bringing charges. Wow. These comments have undermined the integrity of the judiciary, and we will not stand for that, Attorney General Pam Bondi, in other words, wrote on X. The complaint was sent, by the way, to Sri Srinivasan, Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. Federal law provides that Srinivasan can dismiss the complaint, and should, find that the appropriate corrective action has been taken, could find that, or appoint a committee to pursue further reprimand. And what's a Democratic appointee likely to do? Well, in order to be totally transparent, we'll appoint a committee to figure out what to do. Not certain what he's going to do, but The Hill has requested comment from Boasberg through a court spokesperson. Boasberg has faced intense backlash from Trump's allies for his handling of a challenge to the president's use of the Alien Enemies Act, which Trump first invoked in mid-March to swiftly deport alleged Venezuelan gang members to a notorious mega prison in El Salvador and later swap for a triple murderer. And this is exactly the case about which Bove said, we are going to have to say F you to the judges. And Boasberg said, do you know that Bove says that they're going to have to say F you to the judges? Aha! You're under arrest for undermining the integrity of the judiciary. Okay, he hasn't been arrested. But that's what they want to investigate. This is insane. Layers upon layers upon layers of insanity over the same thing, twisting themselves in knots to come up with reasons for prosecuting everybody but themselves, because they're not going to prosecute themselves, obviously. Days after the judicial conference meeting, the judge was assigned to this case and swiftly ordered any airborne flights to turn around. The Supreme Court later lifted the ruling, saying the migrants had sued in the wrong venue. So, standing. Yeah. Boasberg has since accused the Trump administration of willfully violating his ruling and moved toward contempt, though an appeals court has for months halted the proceedings. The Justice Department's new complaint seeks to immediately take Boasberg off the case as an investigation proceeds. It suggests Boasberg should face a public reprimand or even be recommended for impeachment if the investigation finds willful misconduct. Swift, visible action will reinforce the judiciary's integrity by showing judges are held to the same standards they enforce and deter comparable misconduct, Mizell wrote. Mizell, of course, is the guy who ought to be being impeached and dumped here, but only because the entire DOJ has to go. It's going to be quite a disaster if this goes forward. Amazing story. Think about the
From
knots
networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time now to be listening to Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. What's on top of the list today? Trump's lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch is blowing up in his face. And that must be why it's turned orange, I guess. All right, well, let's stay tuned to find out more about that, and we will see you tomorrow.